Hey, Mikey.
Hey, Corn.
So, uh, warning. Uh, and me usually saying warning means something because I never do. Uh, we're gonna be covering some sick guy that
Banana.
hits people, uh,
Oh,
and not just people, kids. Uh, and it's gonna go into some graphic detail. So if you don't want to hear that, don't watch this video. For everyone else, I welcome you to like we had a vote. And this was the number two on the list of things for Banana Bear Dark. Albert Fish.
can I be one of those people that doesn't get
Nope,
to
nope. You gotta go.
me? I want to
Nope,
leave.
nope.
Hmm.
Veto.
Covering the dark part of the web. Darker content, so put the kids to bed. Banana, banana, banana bear dark. Dark, dark, dark.
We've covered a lot of stuff on Banana Bear Dark before.
Yeah.
Some lewd and disgusting people. Some that wanted ghost vaginas. Some people that wanted are said that they were like superior males. Other ones that dress up like little kids. Some cults. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most infamous serial killers that I guess he is known, but not that well known.
Yay.
Uh, of course, I'm talking about Albert Fish. In my opinion, probably the worst of the worst. Because not only did he hurt kids, he ate them. Uh, now, this guy is interesting because he was absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But I'll give you a little spoiler. Uh, the courts didn't give a shit. They still killed him.
Oh, well, I mean
So,
that's fair.
yeah. So there's a little thing. We're gonna look at serial killer documentaries. That's the name of the channel because this is the most in-depth thing about Albert Fish I could find, and it sounds like an AI voice, but I'll fill in the blanks.
Okay.
And escape the desperate poverty of his parents. On May 25th, 1928, he put a classified ad in the Sunday edition of the New York World. Young man, 18, wishes position in country. Edward Budd, 406 West 15th Street. He was a strapping young fellow who was eager to work and contribute to the well-being of his family.
Now, this documentary goes on the waiting. Let's introduce a character,
Hmm.
then the other character, and then the vile shit. Now, they're talking about the advertisement that Albert Fish, uh, he answered from this guy, and his last name was Bud,
Hmm.
which during now this is during the Great Depression, right? And back then, $12 a week is good.
Right.
And he wanted to produce for his family through the hardships, and he wanted to, use his being a strapping young man to get a farm job. And lo and behold, Albert Fish came and answered the ad.
In the morning. The next morning around 11, Frank Howard came to the Budds' apartment bringing gifts of strawberries and fresh creamy pot cheese.
So he
Ew.
said his name was Frank Howard, right?
Okay.
Said that um, he had a farm. He said he had all these pigs and hens, and one of the his workers was going, you know, away, so
Hmm.
he needed somebody else. So Bud was like, "Oh, me and my friend could do it," and he's like, "Yeah, okay." And he brings cheese. He's an old man, but he seems like he's talking good game.
A 10-year-old girl appeared. Gracie was humming a song. Her huge brown eyes and dark brown hair contrasted with her very pale skin and pink lips.
So they offered to, feed him dinner and all that stuff.
Right.
And a little girl pops out, in her church gear and stuff.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, this 10-year-old girl, uh, a faith, a fate worse than a lot of other people will ever cover on this channel, happens to her. And and it's this shit's dark.
She would be a real heartbreaker someday. Coming right from church, she still wore her Sunday clothes: white silk confirmation dress, white silk stockings, and string of creamy pearls made her look older than her 10 years. Frank Howard, like most men who came face to face with the radiant Gracie, couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful girl. "Let's see how good of a counter you are," he said as he handed her a huge wad of bills to count.
Now, this is during the Great Depression. He had money.
Yeah.
And of course, that family that, they're just getting by. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
holy shit, this guy has like coins stuff. And lo and behold, he's like, hey, um, I have to go to a birthday party. And once I come back, I'll grab you, bud, and your friend. And we'll go to my farm. But hey, Gracie, she's a little girl. I'm going to a birthday party. Can I take her with me? And the parents were like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, she'll be fine. She'll, I'll bring her back and, take the boys. I'll even give the boys some money for a movie theater ticket. So did that, and they left.
Just as he was about to leave, he invited Gracie to go with him to his niece's birthday party. He would take good care of her and make sure that Gracie was home before 9 o'clock that evening. Delia asked where Mr. Howard's sister lived, and he replied that she lived in an apartment at Columbus and 137th Street. Delia wasn't sure that she should let her go, but Albert Sr.
So it's an old person birthday party.
No, like his niece, he said.
Oh, his niece. Okay.
convinced her that it would be good for Gracie. Let the poor kid go. She don't see much good times. So Delia helped Gracie on with her good coat and her gray hat with the streamers. She followed Gracie and Mr. Howard outside and watched them disappear down the street. That evening, there was no word from Mr. Howard and no sign of Gracie. A terrible sleepless night with no message from their beautiful daughter. The next morning, young Edward was sent down to the police station to report his sister's disappearance. The worst thing that Police Lieutenant Samuel Dribbin said to the Buds was that the address that Frank Howard had given them for his sister's apartment was fictitious. The kindly old man was a fraud.
Now, lo and behold, nobody would ever give a kid nowadays to a stranger, even though they're rich. You know,
Yeah.
there's sick people could be rich too.
Yep.
Under the circumstances of that, you know, of this, I understand why they did, because like, oh, you can't take my daughter. Then, you know, maybe their son won't get this job,
Right.
you know? And lo and behold, now it, like, back in these days, money is money. And, oh, okay, our daughter's just going to go there, have a good time. He seems all right. He has a ton of money. Like, no, like, not a slime ball, right?
Right. Well, also, you know, it's back in those times, there were simpler times. People hadn't had a lot of bad things. Like, people were not evil. Like,
Yeah, it's not as much as we know now.
yeah,
The
more
serial
trusting.
Serial killers were not huge. Once in a while, you would get something like, you know, Jack the Ripper back in England,
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, some other ones like what have you, but like they're not as known. Not until like the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's when you had serial killers, right?
Yep.
But lo and behold, like I said, this guy, it's a slow burn right now, but it's going to get very, very fucked up.
There was no Frank Howard, no farm in Farmingdale, Long Island. None of it was true. Police began the normal investigative activities. They checked out everything Frank Howard had told the Buds. They also had the Buds go through their rogues gallery of photos and checked on all known child mental patients, etc.
Yeah, because that was a big thing too. Mental psych wards were still a thing.
Yep.
It came to nothing. No trace of Gracie. On June 7th, New York police mailed out 1,000 flyers to police stations throughout the country with a photo of Gracie and a description of Mr. Howard. This activity, along with all the local publicity, guaranteed an epidemic of Gracie sightings and crank letters.
Yeah, because, you know, internet's new
Yep.
time period wise, but fucking there were always trolls.
Each of which had to be thoroughly investigated by the 20-plus detectives who'd been assigned to the
Dang.
case.
20 detectives,
There
dude.
were a couple of solid clues. Police found the Western Union office in Manhattan from which Frank Howard had sent his message to the Buds, plus the original handwritten message. From the writing and grammar, it was clear that Howard had some education and refinement.
Okay.
Police also located the pushcart where Howard had bought the pot cheese that he'd given to the Buds.
He didn't make himself.
Both addresses were in East Harlem, and a few years earlier. In July of 1924, 8-year-old Francis McDonnell played on the front porch of his home in the pastoral
Now, this is another thing.
Charlton Woods section of Staten Island. His mother sat nearby, nursing her infant daughter, when she saw a gaunt elderly man with gray hair and mustache in the middle of the street. She stared at the strange, shabby old man who constantly clenched and unclenched his fists and mumbled to himself. The man tipped his dusty hat to her and disappeared down the street. Later that afternoon, the old man was seen again watching Francis and 4 other boys play ball. The old man called Francis over to him. The other boys continued to play ball. A few minutes later, both the old man and Francis had disappeared. A neighbor noticed a boy that looked like Francis walking that afternoon in a wooded area with an elderly gray-haired tramp behind him. The disappearance of Francis was not noticed until he missed dinner. His father, a policeman, organized a search. They found the boy in the woods under some branches. He had been horribly assaulted. His clothes had been torn from his body, and he'd been spared with his suspenders. Francis had been beaten so badly that the police doubted that the old tramp could have really been as old and frail as he looked.
Dang.
But out of all the crimes, this one is not as bad. Like he beat the
Oh.
shit out of this kid, right? Strangled him,
Yeah.
all this stuff. But he had other plans for the kid.
The beating was so severe that perhaps the old tramp had an accomplice who... I checked on the Grace Budd mystery. Winchell wrote in his column. She was 8 when she was kidnapped about 6 years ago. And it's safe to tell you that the Department of Missing Persons will break the case, or they expect to, in 4 weeks.
By the way, that is Aberfish.
10 days later, Delia Budd received a letter that her lack of education fortunately prevented her from reading.
Now, the most famous thing about Aberfish is the letter he sent her describing what he did.
Her son Edward read it instead and ran out the door to get Detective King. The letter was singularly barbarous. My dear Mrs. Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco for Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor children that all children under 12 were sold for food in order to keep others from starving.
I don't know if this is true, however, how he words it maybe?
A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the body of a boy or girl would be brought out, and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body, and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price.
That's why I don't eat veal.
John stayed there so long, he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7 and one 11. Took them to his home, naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night, he spanked them, bared them, to make their meat good and tender. First he
I know what you're thinking. Man, this sounds like a creepypasta, right?
No.
11-year-old boy, because he had the fattest ass, and of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten, except the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, boiled, broiled, fried, and stewed. The little boy was next, went the same way. At that time, I was living at 409 East 100th Street, near Right Side. He told me so often how good human flesh was, I made up my mind to taste it. On Saturday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street. Brought you pot cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her.
So during this video, they'll probably go through it. But when he went there, he was planning on eating the kid, the 19-year-old, and
Hmm.
his friend. He's going to tie him up and beat the shit out of him and eat him. But when he saw the 10-year-old kid, he's like, "No, I'll have her."
On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I'd already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I didn't, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs.
I would too.
I grabbed her, and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her into small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not have sex with her, though. I could have, had I wished. She died a virgin.
Now that is a more censored thing. He said, "I did not fuck her. She died a virgin." But the guy, I mean, I'm just telling you the truth. That's what the
Right.
thing said. Lo and behold, that is the most famous thing about Albert Fish. However, when he got arrested, because they found the letter was on some post-it from somewhere that he shouldn't have had. Like
Right.
it was rare postage, and one of the workers was like, "Yeah, I stole some of it, and I used to stay at this room, and that's where I left it." And sure enough, he used that. So they knew the guy that was using that room was the one that sent this vivid thing.
Yep.
Messenger 6 years earlier. The envelope had an important clue. A small hexagonal emblem had the letters NYPCBA. Days earlier, the former tenant had called himself Albert H. Fish. The landlady mentioned that Fish had told her to hold a letter that he was expecting from his son, who worked for the Civilian Conservation Corps in North Carolina. The son regularly sent money to his old dad. Finally, the post office told Detective King that it had intercepted a letter for Albert Fish. Detective King was becoming worried that Fish had not contacted his former landlady. The police worried that something had scared him away. On December 13th, 1934, the landlady called Detective King.
So it was a sting they set up. After they found it out, they were like, "Okay, we're gonna get him," but then he didn't
But
contact
nothing
the
was,
landlady.
yeah, nothing was happening until this day, where the landlady said, "Hey, he contacted me."
Albert
okay.
Fish was at the rooming house looking for his letter. The old man was sitting with a teacup when King opened the door.
This is
Fish
actually
stood
funny.
up and nodded when King asked him if he was Albert Fish. Suddenly, Fish reached into his pocket and produced a razor blade, which he held in front of him. Infuriated, King grabbed the old man's hand and twisted it sharply.
"I'll get you. Oh, fuck you, man."
Yeah.
"I've got you now," he said triumphantly. The confessions of Albert Fish would be heard by many law enforcement officials and psychiatrists. A severely edited version of it would appear in the newspapers. It was an odyssey of perversion and unspeakable depravity, which seemed unbelievable until detail after detail was corroborated. It was all the more amazing considering how decrepit and harmless Fish appeared. He was a stooped, frail-looking old man, about 130 pounds and 5 feet 5 inches tall.
I hope this teaches everybody never let your guard down.
Yeah,
Always think. Always think like what does this guy want? A lot of people, like there's some people who are good just by nature and are willing to give you the shirt off their back, but also you got to think of these people who
are the
will
opposite.
give you something, but they expect something in return.
But they're the opposite. You're like, there's good-hearted people. Yeah, there is. But there's also very batshit crazy ones.
Yeah.
Now, in my opinion, I believe Albert Fish was insane. With the one, no one eats people. like hello.
Yeah.
However, the other thing that is like off is when we get into his family life and what he used to do for fun. Which
Okay.
actually, there's a funny thing that this video doesn't tell, which I'll tell at the end,
Okay.
which kind of gives us a fun, like, haha, that happened to him.
Detective King took the initial confession. Fish told him that in the summer of 1928, he'd been overcome by what he called his bloodthirst, his need to banana. When he answered Edward Budd's ad for employment, it was the young man, not his sister Gracie, that he intended to lure to a remote location, restrain him and bear show, leaving him to bleed to death. After he left the Budd house the first time, Fish had purchased the tools he would need to banana the
No, he's fine. He's fine. That's perfectly normal.
boys,
Yeah.
a cleaver, saw, and butcher knife. He wrapped up these implements of destruction into a bundle, which he left at a newsstand before he went to the Budd home for the second and last time. When Fish saw the strapping young Edward, the size of a full-grown man, and his friend Willie, he convinced himself he could overpower the two of them.
Which would have been funny because I think those kids would have whooped his ass.
Yeah,
But
just
then
imagine.
Fish had a lot of experience in that regard. It was only after seeing Gracie that he changed his mind and his plans. It was she he desperately wanted to banana. With the unsuspecting Gracie in tow, he stopped back at the newsstand to pick up his bundle before taking a train to the Bronx and then to the village of Worthington in Westchester. For Gracie, he only bought a one-way ticket. Gracie was enthralled with a 40-minute ride to the countryside. Only twice in her life had she been out of the city. This was a wonderful treat for her. At the station in Worthington, Fish was so absorbed in his monstrous plan that he left the bundle of tools on the train. Ironically, Grace noticed and reminded him to bring his package.
So many
They walked
things happened in this that it's like,
Why? Like, dude, like the those gear tumblers just hit the right marks. Like, if he forgot, he would have not probably done it. He probably would have. It just would have been probably different, maybe.
it might have been different. Maybe she would have a chance to go. Maybe she would be like, oh, he doesn't have his tools and he couldn't do something.
But I mean, how he killed her was just there,
Yeah.
and it just
along a remote road until they reached an abandoned two-story building called Wisteria Cottage in the midst of a wooded area. While Grace entertained herself outside with the various wildflowers, Fish went up to the second-floor bedroom, opened up his bundle of tools, and took off his clothes. He then called to Gracie to come upstairs. With the wildflowers she'd gathered arranged into a bouquet, Gracie came into the house and up to the bedroom. When she saw the old man naked, she screamed for her mother and tried to escape, but Fish grabbed her by the throat and he was by the act of killing her. He propped up her head on an old paint can and decapitated her, catching most of the blood in the paint can. Afterwards, he threw the bucket of blood out into the yard. He undid the headless child. Then he went back to her body and cut it in two with a butcher knife and cleaver. Parts of her body he took with him wrapped in newspaper. The rest he left there until he returned several days later when he threw the portions of her body over a stone wall in the back of the house.
yeah,
He's literally treating her like cattle.
yeah. And now you hear the whole he got aroused by her,
Yeah.
and I think to him he knows that, and he wanted to let Miss Bud know that don't worry, I didn't, fuck her.
Yeah, that was a milestone for him.
Yeah, for him it's like, hey, I could have done that. She died a virgin, so you have that. Like, fuck, dude.
He disposed of his tools in the same fashion. After his confession, Detective King had a final question. What caused him to do this horrible thing? You know, Fish answered, I never could account for it. Captain John Stein asked him why he'd written a letter to the Budds, and Fish responded that he didn't know why. I just had a mania for writing.
Asshole.
That day, the police went to Wisteria Cottage and
That was a lie. He did it because he wanted to boast about
recovered
it.
the remains of Gracie. Albert Fish stood nearby, completely without emotion of any kind. That night at 10 p.m., Fish was interrogated by Assistant District Attorney P. Francis Merrow. When Merrow asked Fish why he'd murdered Gracie, he explained that a sort of bloodthirst had overwhelmed him. Once it was done, he was overcome with sorrow.
Bullshit.
Yep.
When I killed this kid, I felt so bad about it. So bad that I cut her up in many pieces and put all this meat into paper, like it's like, and left her remains in that house until 9 days later, where I'm like, oh, let me clean this up by throwing him over a stone wall in that property.
I would have given my life within a half hour after I'd done it to restore it to her. Merrow
He even says in that letter it took him 9 days to eat.
Yep.
asked if he loved Gracie, and Fish was adamant. It never entered my head.
Thank God, got that Freddy Krueger thing, like, oh, he was just a child killer, not a molester. You still murdered the kid, you fucker.
Nothing was asked at that time, nor
and it
was
wasn't
anything
like
volunteered about.
it wasn't like he was being some altruistic, oh, I can't do this. It was
I didn't.
It wasn't
Clap
there's
for
no
me.
reason that he
Clap
didn't.
for me. I didn't do that. I'm not the biggest piece of shit. But you are. That would make you even bigger.
The cannibalism mentioned in Fish's letter to the Buds. The police may have considered it too insane to be true. Or perhaps they were already thinking that including horrible details about cannibalism would bolster the inevitable defense case for insanity.
Now, at this time too, this is not normal.
Right.
And a lot of people got off scot-free because they're insane.
Mm-hmm.
So if they think God told them to do it, it's usually, insanity. And if you do a crime this vile, like nowadays they have like psych ward, like, psychologists that determine what your mental status is.
Yep.
But like with this, they're like, the cops are like, okay, listen, we can't let anybody know that he ate the girl.
Yep.
Because then public would know he's crazy.
Yeah.
Therefore, if we have trial, they're going to say he's insane. Then we can't kill him.
That night, the capture of Albert Fish had leaked to the newspapers, and reporters descended on the Budd apartment with the news. Shortly afterwards, Detective King drove Mr. Budd and his son Edward to the police station to identify Fish. Edward did more than identify Fish. He threw himself at the old man. "You old bastard, dirty son of a bitch." Mr. Budd was surprised at Fish's lack of emotion. "Don't you know me?" he asked the old man. "Yes," Fish answered politely. "You're Mr. Budd." "And you're the man who came to my home as a guest and took my little girl away," he said in tears. Albert Fish, not surprisingly, was no stranger to police. His record stretched back to 1903 when he'd been jailed for grand larceny.
But it's for petty
Since
crimes.
then, he'd been arrested 6 times for various petty crimes, such as sending obscene letters and petty theft. Half of those arrests occurred around the time of Gracie's abduction. Each time, the charges were dismissed. He'd been in mental institutions more than once. When asked about his background, Fish said, "I was born May 19th, 1870, in Washington, D.C.
That's definitely close to my birthday.
We lived on B Street, Northeast, between 2nd and 3rd. My father was Captain Randall Fish, 30 mother continuously, and had to be dragged by the old man on and off the trolley. The little boy, as it turned
Oh,
out,
this is
was
another
a
account that
kidnapped-
they
That's where I
linked
met my
to
wife.
him. This boy.
After our 6 children were born, she left me. She took all the furniture and didn't even leave a mattress for the children to sleep on.
And this is his backstory.
I'm
a
still
little
worried
bit.
about my children.
He had 6
sniffled.
kids with somebody. They left him.
His 6 children ranged
Sounds like a
from
great
age
father, right?
21 to 35.
And they were already old. They were, in their 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
You'd think they'd come to visit their old dad in jail, but they haven't. Albert Fish was facing indictments in Manhattan and Westchester County. First, Westchester County indicted him on a charge of first-degree murder, while Manhattan was preparing an indictment for kidnapping. Meanwhile, police got a really major break. The motorman on the Brooklyn trolley line saw a picture of Fish in the newspaper and came forward to identify Fish as the nervous old man that he saw February 11th, 1927, who was trying to quiet the little boy sitting with them on the trolley. Joseph Meehan, the retired motorman, watched the two carefully. The little boy, who didn't have a coat or jacket, was crying for his mother continuously and had to be dragged by the old man on and off the trolley. The little boy, as it turned out, was the kidnapped Billy Gaffney. Ultimately, Fish did confess the unspeakable things he did to Billy Gaffney. I brought him to the Riker Avenue dumps. There's a house that stands alone not far from where I took him. I took the boy there, stripped him naked and tied his hands and feet and gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out of the dump. Then I burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. Then I walked
Psychopath.
back and took the trolley to 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked from there home.
So we tied him up,
Yep.
took his clothes, so he's naked, and his shoes, burned him, threw out the shoes, then left to go home.
Next day around 2 p.m., I took tools and a good heavy cat of nine tails.
Now, do you know what a cat of nine tails is?
Yes.
If you guys don't know, it's 9 pieces of string that have blades on it. And what it is it's basically a whip. And it's a very horrible thing. Like, I think Art the Clown used it in
Yep.
Terrifier 2. But he had, like, scissor blades on it.
Homemade, short handle. Cut one of my belts in half, slit these halves in 6 strips about 8 inches long. I whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear,
Oh, fuck.
gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to
So he's mutilating.
Yeah.
The hell?
Mm-hmm.
his body and drank his blood. I picked up 4 old potato sacks and gathered a pile of stones. Then I cut him up. I had a grip with me. I put his nose, ears, and a few slices of his belly in the grip. Then I cut him through the middle of his body, just below the belly button. Then through his legs, about 2 inches below his behind. I put this in my grip with a lot of paper. I cut off the head, feet, arms, hands, and the legs below the knee. This I put in sacks weighed with stones, tied the ends, and threw them into the pool of slimy water you'll see all along the road going to North Beach. During his interviews with police, Fish further confessed, I came home with my meat. I had the front of his body I liked best. His monkey and peewees,
That's his penis and balls.
and a nice little fat behind to roast in the oven and eat. I made a stew out of his ears, nose, pieces of his face and belly. I put onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt and pepper. It was good. Then I split the cheeks of his behind open, cut off his monkey and peewees, and washed them first.
Well, thank God.
I
I put strips of
this
bacon
guy.
on each
Hate
cheek of his behind and put them in the oven. Then I picked 4 onions, and when the meat had roasted about a quarter hour, I poured about a pint of water over it for gravy and put in the onions. At frequent intervals, I basted his behind with a wooden spoon, so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, it was nice and brown, cooked through. I never ate any roast turkey that tasted half as good as his sweet, fat little behind did. I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days. His little monkey was as sweet as a nut, but his peewees I couldn't chew. Threw them in the toilet.
bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Days later, a man from Staten Island came forward to identify Fish as the man who tried to lure his then 8-year-old daughter into the woods not far from where Frances O'Donnell was murdered 3 days later in 1924. The girl, in her late teens, saw him in his cell and recognized him. The gray man was found. Fish was also tied to the 1932 murder of a 15-year-old girl named Mary O'Connor in Far Rockaway.
The hell?
Yeah. So, because I see how frustrated you're getting, let's get to the part where I think there's some justification of, like, he got his upcomings at least.
American children because he believed that the police did not pay much attention when
Well, he said he confessed to more murders.
Mm-hmm.
He said he killed a lot of black children because they never would find, they don't care.
Right.
Back then they didn't.
obscene letters and did so frequently, raised, shouting, "I am Christ." Fish told
Uh, so his kids were for character witnesses. Hey, how your dad was. They're like, well, that was weird. He thought he was Jesus. He used to want us to spank him with a paddle that had nails in it. And it would be like,
What?
hey, guess a number and how off they were. That's how much they should spank him. He used to go up to the kids and stuff and say he's Jesus and all this fun stuff. He also admitted, hopefully I could find the thing, that he was a sadomasochist. He liked pain a lot, where he put pin needles in between his balls and his butthole, and they did an X-ray, and he had 37 pins, I want to say. Yeah, because he said, "Oops," because the skin would like kind of take it in, because he
Mm-hmm.
would leave it in, but then it would like kind of soak in, so he couldn't grab it. So he had all these pins in there. Now, lo and behold, it didn't take very long. I think it was only 2 hours for them to rule guilty. The insanity plea did not work, thankfully, and he was sentenced. And now, when he was sentenced, he thanked the judge after the guy's like, "I sentenced you to death by electric chair." Now, this video didn't say something that I know something about this. So, if you know anything about electricity, metal is a conductor.
Yes.
So how the electric chair used to do is they used to put like a sponge that had water in it, go in there, and it would go through your body and out,
Yep.
and you're dead. However, if you have a metal conductor in the middle, let's say between your balls and your butthole, it becomes a circuit, and you get cooked
Yeah.
from the inside.
Okay.
He died very painfully.
I mean, but really, if he's a sadomasochist, then
No, it's. I don't think being cooked and then being pricked is the same type of pain as electrical charge got connected and it fried him on the. Those pins got fried on the inside, so he literally got cooked from the inside out instead of just getting a surge. He literally it got surge, and magnificently. And I think I don't want to say, um, his eyes like I think exploded. So, if anything, that electrical charge made it hurt more.
yep.
Now, maybe he got into that. I don't know about you. Even if you're into pain, your eyes blowing up is pretty bad. So this was the Gray Man, Albert Fish,
I
piece of
hate
shit.
this. I hate this. Mother fucking hate this.
This was number 2 on our little like thing. A lot of people didn't want Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy, but Albert Fish is somebody that's not really covered that much because of how vile he is. And I'll say this right now, Banana Bear show, like Banana Bear Dark, I don't think there is anyone as fucked up as Albert Fish, especially in the time frame. Like maybe the Night Stalker, because he was real fucked up.
Oh, good.
But that's he's too well known for Banana Bear Dark. Um, Maybe next time we do Banana Bear Dark, another cult. I
Yeah,
don't
let's
know,
do another
Goonies?
cult to take a break from the serial killer horrible man. Oh,
But I mean, yeah. I mean, I said we were going to cover some fucked up shit. But yeah, like the
yeah.
worst thing for me is I knew about the Grace Bud thing.
Hmm.
You know, her choking, getting eaten for 9 days, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
The thing I didn't know was the other kid, because if you heard the letter, he explains how that guy took 2 kids and cut off blah blah blah.
Yeah.
That's what he did to the kid.
Yeah.
So he was admitting to another crime.
Yeah.
And because he was a sadomasochist, all this, I am for sure. I will tell you this right now. He was insane.
Yeah.
He was insane. And would it be right for him to get off? No. Like Ed Gein, same thing. He got off, but he only killed one person. He
Doesn't
was
matter.
also a cannibal, but once again, he was extremely insane and autistic. this guy was just fucking plain insane. You know, like Hellraiser, the puzzle box.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like because all pleasures don't like work now, but this is like pain pleasure. He
Yeah.
was like one of those guys.
Yeah, no, I know. The way you deal with those guys is you put them in a room with nothing, like basically soft material, and you kill their sensory organs. They have no pain anymore, so therefore
Well,
they have nothing.
yeah, just break their spine.
Oh yes,
So they'll
yes,
be a paraplegic. Can't feel anything.
but make them live a long, long life.
That's not insane.
Mhm.
No, I agree. Like there's certain people, yeah, special place in hell,
Yeah.
and this guy, like just him describing it was the worst. But yeah, there you go. Albert Fish is done. I don't have to do it anymore.
Thank goodness this is it. Yeah, I guess we'll call that a show. Try and end it without.
Okay, I can do it. Hey, so down below, if there's any other serial killers that you think Albert Fish is not as like that they're better than Albert Fish, let us know in the comment below.
No,
Or if
no,
you're watching this premiere and
don't do
stuff,
that.
you know, Mikey, I'm not gonna push you towards the edge. I'm just getting other ideas because if we're gonna do Banana Bear Darks, it's gonna be once like a month maybe, you know.
Can we just go back to doing just locales again? Can we
Oh,
stop?
as we turn. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Andy Ditch screaming his poo-filled cries. Cyrax covered in scabs with bedbugs lies. The Banana Bear Show! Subscribe and buy a t-shirt. Lockout coverage makes you laugh till it hurt. The Banana Bear Show! Subscribe to the channel. The Banana Bear Show! Subscribe to the channel. The Banana Bear Show!